cyber insurance, would that fall in your scenario where the supplier sent out 2 wire transfers? Would that cover?
So it would depend on the policy, right? And that's why it's so important to hire counsel to review that policy.
Does it have to specifically say that scenario for wire transfers or spoof emails or the policy?
Yeah, I mean, those specific types of questions and reviewing the policy and seeing what it covers and doesn't cover is the best way to move forward. Really, the totality of the agreement is the policy in particular is what the attorneys do.
And you'll see sometimes where the policy itself, it will cover sort of specific scenarios, and it might specify that, but other times it's much more broad, and it might still cover that, or it might not, or it might be arguable. And when you're filling out sort of this application, this initial application, it's very important to know exactly what questions you're being asked and think, should I just check yes or no? Or maybe I should check something and then provide additional information to explain my answer. Because it's fairly common out there that you just check yes or no, and then it comes time to file a claim, and they say, well, you just said yes. And the answer was really more like maybe. And you didn't explain what the maybe was all about. And so we feel that you lied on your application, and now we have an issue here. So that's one of the biggest risks here, especially up front, in making sure that you're signing up for what you hope you're signing up for.
I think the message that we would give is don't assume that it's covered under your general commercial policy. Ask questions. Go ahead.
Does the attorney-client privilege vary amongst industries?
The question is, does attorney-client privilege vary across industries?
So it's governed by state law, Michigan law, Christine was having it in Michigan.
What about federal, like the Federal Reserve Board, FDIC, HIPAA?
So attorney-client privilege is going to attach to communications between the entity and their attorney, notwithstanding any governmental agency that you're dealing with. It's universal.
Yeah.
John, just want to add to your scenario number 2 about the ransomware, the design firm. I have to work with you on that. And I just wanted to point out it's important to have that incident response plan, because I think in that specific instance, when a company does get ransomware, a business does have a ransomware compromise, sometimes the ransomware has a time frame. And that was the case in that situation where they didn't even have the option to pay because they had delayed longer than the time frame was available to them to actually decide to pay.
Yeah, it was an escalating. I think just to summarize, if you couldn't hear, Eric was saying that in some circumstances with ransomware, there's a time limit on when you can actually pay the ransom. And after a certain period of time, they actually won't unlock anything because you waited too long. In that circumstance, I believe it was an escalating situation as well, where the price actually went up the longer that you waited to respond. So if you didn't, there was actually an email embedded, I believe, in the name of the file that said email us to determine what the ransom is. And so at some point you need to email, and they know when you email, and they know when they activated everything, so they can tell how long it took. And the longer it takes, the more Bitcoins they're going to want you to pay. So something to consider if you're amenable to actually paying the ransom is there is, I guess in some circumstances, a benefit to acting.
John, in reference to the lady's question about insurance, needless to say, there isn't a thing that y'all have talked about today that can't be covered by insurance. However, as you've said, you got to make sure that you're dealing with somebody who understands those insurance policies, okay, and understands what they're covering. But whether it's ransomware, whether it's the hacker, whether it's wire transfer fraud, it's all insurable. And those are risks that today, no one has said how much a data breach really costs. And I know the Ponum Institute puts numbers out there. Small Business Administration has a number out there, but for the average small business, the number is $188,000 is the cost of a data breach. And if you think about that compared to buying an insurance policies start at $1,000. So comparatively, insurance is probably a better way to go than anything else.
Yeah.
You said that anything else, and I would argue that you can't really insure your way out of a bad environment.
Right. And just to summarize, in case anyone didn't hear, Larry in the back was pointing out that every risk is insurable. It just depends on you essentially identify them and work with someone who understands what risks you're looking to insure. And then ultimately the actual cost can be very high. And there's one source that says like $180,000 per breach. And I would even say that a cybersecurity breach could put you out of business. I mean, it's that significant. So think through these issues very carefully. Okay?
Let's talk a different scenario. Let's say you're a client of a financial institution and you have been made aware of a potential breach over the phone, but it had never been publicly made known. They were just ignoring it, hoping it goes away. If something were to happen, let's say to that client's information and their identity was stolen, do they have recourse then to go back and say it came from that breach, or what should the next step be?
So your question is about recourse against potentially a company or organization that allowed a breach to happen
Right.
from someone who essentially suffers harm because of that breach. Is that the question?
Right.
Okay. I don't know if you guys want to address that or just think through. I know there's limitations on.
This is one of the sort of hottest areas legal-wise in terms of sort of proving. There's so much out there right now in terms of data breaches, and like I said earlier, I myself have probably received notification of 8 to 10 over the years at least. So, thinking through how that works, it just makes sense that there would be a natural question of, was this even from the breach that you're thinking of? Who do you sue? Are you sure, or even talk to at the initial stage? And then the immediate counter argument is going to be, well, that wasn't our breach. How do you know it's our breach? But there's been a decent amount of success with some pretty large lawsuits lately that we've been kind of keeping an eye on. And, it sort of depends on the arguments you're making and the facts and circumstances of the actual case. Not to give you the really boring answer, but it depends. But in many cases, it's at least worth talking about, and it may very well be worth a conversation between the individual or the business and the other business or a certain financial service company or whatever it is that may have been the root cause of this.
It's going to be fact specific. And so in the financial industry, so the specific company, they have a fiduciary duty to their customers. But in addition to having a duty, you have to show breach of it. But what policies did this company, did they do everything right? And as if someone got lucky? Or was there, maybe some issues that they had that they didn't deal with, maybe swept under the rug and didn't face it? And then the other issue that's going to be sort of fact intensive is going to be attributing any damage the customer had to that specific breach, right? That's going to be how you prove that this damage was associated with that specific breach. So it depends. It depends. It's very fact specific. And each case has to be looked at individually.
I think we're kind of out of time unless anyone has like one final question that we can answer in 3 words or less. Any other, one final question? Anyone else have a thought? Well, thank you for coming. Mike, if you want to come up and just to say a final word or kind of say thank you, and I'll just say quickly on behalf of Foster Swift, we really appreciate the opportunity to give you some education on this topic. Really our main purpose was to hopefully help people take their head out of the sand and realize that these are very serious issues And, you can contact us anytime if you need help, assistance, questions. Don't hesitate, and don't hesitate to be proactive as well. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have questions, we'll be around a little bit, but thank you for coming.